What I was carrying on me to start is I wore my Salomon vest. I had a Soft Flask water bottle on my left, Soft Flask water bottle on my right. Each one of those had 2 scoops of G1M Sport and an extra scoop of electrolytes. So I had 40 grams of carbs and 1,200 milligrams of sodium in each bottle. And then I had 2 Spring Energy gels in my right pocket, 2 Spring Energy gels in my left pocket, and a Field Bar. And I had some salt tabs just for like emergency, like salt stick, salt tabs. That's what I started out with. And first loop, first 20 miles felt really good, really smooth until I sprained my ankle. So it was probably mile 15. And it's funny because it's whenever you're feeling really confident, you're running and you're feeling good and you're thinking, holy shit, I'm floating today. Like this is going to be a good race. And you get a little complacent. You get a little risky with some of the routes and what you're jumping over. And I'm cruising mile 15. And all of a sudden I hit this route because it's a very rooty course. There's roots everywhere. It's technical in that sense. And my ankle, and I have the weakest ankles. Every year I sprain an ankle. Every single year during every prep. In mile 15, I just hit this route and my whole ankle turned. And I stopped for a second and I couldn't put any weight on that ankle. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. Mile 15 of 100 and I'm gonna sprain my ankle already. So I finished that loop and I came into the crew and I was having a really hard time putting pressure on that left foot. So I asked if they had any tape or anything to tape it up because Klink was there, Adam Klink, and Adam was a collegiate soccer player. They were spraining their ankles all the time. He knows how to tape up ankles. So he went to find some tape and some gauze to tape up my ankle, and he was going to meet me out on the course to tape it up. So I came in mile 20, met up with the crew, resupplied on G1M Sport and electrolytes in my bottle, resupplied on Spring Energy gels and Field Bars. One thing I know with any type of endurance training, especially the longer it gets, a marathon, nutrition matters. An Ironman, nutrition really matters. An ultramarathon, nutrition really, really matters. And you have to stay on top of your nutrition. It's almost like saying that if you're dehydrated, that is too late to start drinking water. You want to get ahead of it before you get dehydrated. You want to get ahead of it before you're low on carbohydrates and nutrition. So even if I wasn't hungry from the beginning, I was staying on top of my G1M Sport, electrolytes, Spring Energy gels, Field Bars. My goal was to get in as much nutrition as possible during every loop without getting sick. That was my goal. Before the race started, I will go back a little bit and talk about nutrition. My routine is always the same. It's about 3 hours before a race starts. I have a bagel with peanut butter, honey, and banana. And then I mix up 2 scoops of G1M Sport and I start sipping on that until the race begins. And that's what I did for Rocky Raccoon. So I already was topped off on sodium stores, electrolyte stores. My muscle and liver glycogen was already topped off over the last 3 days of just consuming a dense diet and carbohydrates. I always do a carb load the 3 days leading into a race or an event. And then those quick sugars that I had and carbs going into that race morning. And then during the race, staying on top of it. So going into loop 2, I knew my ankle was pretty messed up, but I anticipated that I was going to link up with the crew, specifically Adam, at some point on loop 2, which I did. It was probably mile, I want to say 25, maybe 30, that I linked up with Klink, and he taped up my ankle. He put a thick amount of tape on my left ankle, which pretty much made it into a boot. So I couldn't really move my left foot left or right, which was great. It's what I wanted. And then I could put as much pressure on it. It still hurt when I hit certain roots or rocks, but it it held that ankle in place so I could run on it for the next, 80 plus miles. So that saved my ankle, taping it up. And then finishing loop 2, same thing. I stayed on top of nutrition, stayed on top of hydration, came in at mile 40. I believe it was mile 40. I think it was loop 2. I wanted to start adding some like whole foods into my diet during the race. I was at every checkpoint having like a peanut butter, honey, and like English muffin sandwich to get some actual nutrition that wasn't liquid carbs or gels in, because if you keep just staying on top of like G1M in gels for an entire race, you will get some stomach discomfort. You're probably going to get stomach discomfort no matter what during a 100-mile race. I did during Leadville. I did during Rocky. Coming into loop 2, the team had Chick-fil-A there, and I saw Chick-fil-A sandwich. I was like, oh, that's calling my name right now. That tasted delicious. That was absolutely great. And what I've learned with like these ultra races is sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to what your body is craving or what you can actually eat. You just have to be prepared to kind of adapt and change over the course of a race. It's easy to say, and it's almost ignorant to say, I'm going to consume this at mile 5, this at mile 10, this at mile 30, this at mile 80. Yeah, that all sounds great, but when you're actually there, sometimes you can't stomach what you planned on consuming. So coming into the second loop, Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich was game changing. Went into loop 3. Loop 3, knowing that after loop 3, I was going to be at mile 60, which was, past the halfway point, obviously. There were a lot of checkpoints and water stations on the course, which is really nice. And they had good nutrition. They had bananas, oranges, which I consumed a lot of bananas and oranges out in the course. They had bacon. They had quesadillas. They had ramen. They had everything out in that course. But knowing my body, I knew early on that if I stayed with like bananas and oranges and maybe some small slices of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at these checkpoints, water points, that's what I could handle. So coming into loop 3 at mile marker 60, this was like the only low point for me at the course. And I don't know why. Like I felt better at mile 80 and 100 than I did at mile 60. Coming in at mile 60, and I think it was more mental than physical. And to be honest, I like the 50 miles out, 50 miles back, as opposed to 5 20-mile loops. Mentally, it kind of just fucks you up. So when I came in from loop 3, mile 60, I just wasn't feeling super solid. I was tired. I was kind of out of it and delirious, and I don't know why. Everyone that was there kind of anticipated it and expected it because they saw me at Leadville. My dad, though, who wasn't at Leadville, saw me at mile 60, and he was all worried. He was all nervous. But it's like, Dad, I went 60 miles so far on some fairly technical trails. It's expected. I got 40 more miles left. I'm good. I'm solid. So from mile 60 to 80, I slowed down. I did slow down because it got dark and started getting colder. So obviously headlamps came on and pace slowed down a little bit because under headlamp and trying to navigate through some routes and technical terrain, naturally you're just going to slow down a little bit. The first 20 miles, I was holding probably an 8:40 to 9 minute per mile pace. Spraining my ankle definitely slowed me down. It definitely slowed me down. So 20 to 40, miles 20 to 40, I would say I was holding a 10:30 to 11 minute per mile pace. And then 40 to 60, again, probably like 11 to 11:30 minute per mile pace. And then after that, I held maybe a 11:30 to 12. Overall, I believe my average minute per mile pace, I believe, was like 11 minutes and 15 seconds. That's what I think it was. But I did start getting some stomach discomfort between mile 60 and 80. And it's just expected on an ultra. You know, you'll see people out on the course throwing up and darting into the wood line with diarrhea. And when you're trying to consume all these calories from different sources, being gels and powders and fruit and sandwiches and bars, and then you're trying to run 100 miles on top of that, your stomach starts getting weird. So I did start getting some stomach discomfort between mile 60 and 80, some slight diarrhea that I was able to just go into the porta potty and use, which was fine. I didn't have to poop in the woods this time, like Leadville or anything. And then when I got to mile 80, back to the crew at the checkpoint, they had pizza there. And I was that like hit the spot. Pizza. And a lot of people will think ultra runners, you know, you're eating so clean and so well all the time, but then you get out to a race and you're eating Chick-fil-A sandwiches and pizza. Like, what are you doing? But sometimes, like I said earlier, you don't know what your body's going to crave and what it can handle. And at this point in the race, mile 80, my stomach was hurting. I really didn't want to put any more, as I had to keep putting electrolytes into my body, but not an abundance of, because just like the salt will start getting to you. Sometimes the powders and gels, like I didn't use gels after mile 40. My stomach just couldn't handle those. And pizza, however, at mile 80 made my stomach feel really, really good. So I had 3 slices of pizza. I believe it was Papa John's they had. And man, that hit the spot.